Hi, how you going? I'm Sam Malcolm, and in this video I'm going to go through the differences between the different JavaScript variable declaration keywords. So we have var, which is short for variable, let, which is the same as the word let in English, and const, which is a shortened version of constant. So the main difference between these three are scoping, where they're scoped. And in a program, scope basically means where the variable is available to be used. So let's go through these one at a time. So firstly we have var. So if I initialize a variable at the top here, test1 equals text. This variable is now globally scoped. It's available everywhere in the application. And this sort of flexibility is one of the issues people have with var and why people tend not to use it. If I had a function here, I'm just going to call it init, and I declared a variable inside of here, I'm going to just set it equal to an integer here. This is now scoped to the function, and so it's available everywhere inside of this function, but it's not available outside of this function. So I'll just show you what that looks like now. So I'm just going to log the first one, the first variable to the console. This one. This, of course, needs a dot. Save it. So I'm going to be running this script with Node. You don't need to worry about using Node. It will work exactly the same if you were to run this on the front end in the browser, wherever you're using JavaScript. So I write node index. As you can see, we're logging this text here to the console. So if I actually call this function, and because I've called this function, and in this function I've declared test2 as a variable, will it work if I log it here? Let's just run this now. Let's be clear. As you can see, I'm getting an error here. Test2 is not defined because the scoping of var means that if you declare a variable inside of a function, it's only available within that function. But it is available everywhere inside that function. So if you have a smaller block, like say an if statement like this, I can also use test2 inside of here. It's going to work just the same. So if I delete this console log, I'm going to comment this one out for now, clear the terminal, run it again. It's going to log to the console as we expect because it's available everywhere inside of the function. The other thing and also with globally scoped variables like this one at the top here, it's available everywhere inside of this function too because it's available globally. So if I was to change this to test1, and we'll run node index again, we're going to get text because this one is taking it from here. It's available everywhere. So with var, it also allows you to redeclare and update variable content. So if I was to update test1 here and set it equal to 3, and we'll run it again, we're now getting it equal to 3 even though we declared it as text at the top of the screen. Var also lets you do something which the others do not, and that's I can actually redeclare it. So if we run this now, I've declared it here, but I've also redeclared this variable as 3 here. And this this allowance of redeclaration is actually one of the issues with var. So I'm going to show you what I mean by that. So I'm just going to remove this redeclaration here. And inside of this function, I'm going to be like, I'll just actually comment this part out for now. I'm going to say, if this is true, I want var test1 to equal 3. So if I log that out to the console here, but then I also log it out to the console after the function has been run, let's just clear this for now and run it here. So when the variable gets logged out to the console the first time, it gets updated to 3, which meets this condition, but outside of the function, it's still text. It's still what was declared up here. And that can be quite confusing, and that's one of the use cases as why people don't tend to use var with modern JavaScript. So the next one we have is let. So let me just clean this up a bit. Var. I'm going to not do these now. If I run node index, no, I did didn't save it. If I run node index, don't want to say that, should return nothing. Good. Okay, so let's go to let now. So let is like var in that it can be updated, it can't be redeclared, but it is not globally scoped or functionally scoped, it's block scoped. So basically, wherever you declare a let variable, it's available everywhere inside of that block. And a block is any chunk of text that's between braces. So these are braces, these aren't curly brackets. Most people call them curly brackets, they're actually braces. So if I say let test3 equals 4, I can't then go let test3 equal 5. If I was to run this, I'm going to get an error because the test3 has already been declared earlier in the application. So it's not going to let me do that. But if I write a function, I'm just going to call this init2. Let's call it down here. Test4 equal test, just for now. If I was to console log test4 inside of the function, it would be fine. So I'm just going to clear this. I'm getting test as expected, but if I tried to log that out to the console, even after the function is run, it's not going to work. It's going to give it not defined because it's only available within that block. But that also works for smaller blocks. So if I was to say put a conditional statement in here, say as if true, that's when we're going to declare this let variable inside of this function, and then we're going to log it here. Let's see what happens here. Let's clear this. So we're getting the same error because let variables are scoped to the block, which means that this variable that we've declared here is only available within these two braces. So even if I try to log it 2 lines afterwards in the same function, it's not going to let me do that because it's scoped to the block. So let can also be updated just like any other, just like var can. So if I was to say test3 equals text underneath this declaration of test3, and then I'll log that out to the console here. I'll comment out this function call so we don't confuse the log. Clear this. Test4 is not defined. Oh, of course, didn't save it. Should always save it. We're getting text because it's been updated. We can't, as I explained before, we can't redeclare it, but we can update the value of a let variable. So the third one that we have is const. Let's just go here and write const, which is short for constant. And the reason, so let me just go here. So const is short for constant because basically the value of it cannot be updated after it's been declared. So it's declared just like this, const test5 equals, we'll make it 6, why not? So if I was to take this constant variable and try to update, oh, not there, try to update the value of it to be 7, let's clear this, node index. I can't, it's saying I'm trying to do an assignment to a constant variable. Now everything else about const in terms of scoping is exactly the same as let. It's block scoped, just the same. Really important to note that. The other thing with const is it's not perfectly immutable. So what I mean by that is if I set this test to be a JavaScript object, I can't change what the value is, but I can actually update properties of the JavaScript object. So if I say test5 is equal to a JavaScript object, and I'm saying the property name of that object is now equal to test, I go log test5.name, clear this, node index. It's logging that to the console because it allows us to update the properties of JSON objects. That's the only edge case, or it's the only scenario where you can actually update anything really about a constant variable. It would work if let me just copy this, put down here, there's now another test. So if I clear this, so you can do it, as you can see, as much as you like. So I'm just going to comment out these console logs. So my advice when deciding which variable declaration term to use is to use the one that is most strict and then work backwards from there. So if you can get away with using const in your program, you should use const. And if you can't use const because you have to update it for whatever reason, you should use let. And if you can't use let, I would strongly suggest that you look at maybe there's another way that you can write your program that's going to allow you to use let. So the reason why in programming it's good to use strict rules is because it encourages best practices, and it also allows us to quickly find common gotchas and stuff like that because we know that our program's working to strict rules. So I'll show you an example of this. So if I was using a var variable and I said var test7 equals, we'll make it 8, and then later down in the program I had if test7 equals text, I'm going to log to the console true, otherwise I'm going to log false. So basically this is going to evaluate this if condition. If it's true, it's going to log true. If it's false, it's going to log false. Test7 is equal to 8, so test, does it equal test? We expect it to be false. So if I clear this and I run node index, we get true, but test7 doesn't equal test. But I've done a very common mistake here, which is I've used the assignment operator instead of the assertion operator inside of an if statement. And if you've never made this mistake, you've probably not been programming long enough, because I make this all the time and it's a notoriously difficult gotcha to find. Whereas if I had have changed this var to a const instead, and now I try to run the program, I'm getting an error, and it's telling me exactly where that error is. So I can see, oh, well, here's what I've done. I put a single equals when I needed a double equals. I can change that easily, save it, we'll run it again, and as you can see, we're getting the expected result of false. So the key takeaways from this video are that there are 3 different ways to declare variables, and they all differ. They all are different in their own ways. The main difference is scoping. So scoping in programming is where something is available. So the different words that you use change where the variable is available. Var is globally scoped or functionally scoped. Let is scoped to a block. Now a block is anything between 2 braces. It's any chunk of code between 2 braces. Const is block the same, but it is almost perfectly immutable. You cannot update it, but you can update properties of objects if you're using it to store a JSON object. And if you can, you should be using const where you can. Otherwise, you should be using let where you can, and otherwise you should think about how you might be able to refactor your code. So thank you for joining me for this video. If you found it helpful, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Either way, thank you for watching it, and until next time, good luck coding.